This is a story of a 17-year-old girl who disappeared under mysterious circumstances.
When we talk about the most heinous crimes of the pagan MC, the list is usually never-ending. But as the record shows, it all started with Amy Billig. Amy Billig was born in Oyster Bay, New York, on January 9, 1957, the first of two children born to Nathaniel Solomon and Susan Billig. Her father owned an art gallery, while her mother was an interior designer and art dealer. Family followed the Jewish faith. Susan Billig had suffered 4 miscarriages before giving birth to Amy. She later described her only daughter as a sociable, spiritual teenager and a flower child, very much into nature. Her hobbies included playing the flute and guitar in addition to reading and writing poetry. She also trained dolphins at the Miami Seaquarium. Amy was close to her mother, who later reflected, "I would look at her and think, what did I do to deserve such a beautiful thing?" Due to concerns regarding crime levels in New York, the Billigs relocated from New York City to Coconut Grove, Florida in May 1969, where Nathaniel opened an art gallery and Susan pursued her professions as an art dealer and interior designer. The family resided in a middle-class household and, by the early 1970s, were active in several community cultural organizations. Both Amy and her younger brother, Joshua, born February 14, 1958, attended local private schools. By 1974, Amy was considering becoming an actress following her anticipated graduation from Adelphi Academy of Coral Gables on March 31st. As she did not own a car, she often hitchhiked in and around her neighborhood, although never for considerable distances. At the time of her disappearance, Amy was 17 years old, was 5'5" in, and weighed 110 pounds. She had wavy, mid-brown, waist-length hair, a distinctive 2-inch appendectomy scar on her abdomen, and possibly a tattoo. On the afternoon of Tuesday, March 5, 1974, Amy returned home from school, ate a yogurt, then telephoned her father to ask if she could borrow $2 to pay for a scheduled lunch with some friends in nearby Peacock Park. Her father agreed, and Amy changed her blouse and began hitchhiking to her father's art gallery on nearby Commodore Plaza to borrow the money with view to later meeting her friends for lunch. She was observed by construction workers hitchhiking at the corner of Poinciana Street and Main Highway in Coconut Grove, close to her family home, in the early afternoon. This would prove to be the last definitive sighting of Amy, as she never arrived at her father's art gallery. At the time of her disappearance, Amy was wearing a denim miniskirt and cork platform sandals. By the evening of March 5th, Amy's mother and brother had become concerned when she failed to return home. This concern began when Amy's friends phoned the residence to ask Susan why her daughter had failed to meet them as promised, and increased to panic when Nathaniel returned home to divulge Amy had failed to appear at his workplace as promised to borrow her lunch money. A call to the local police department only earned a promise of an investigation if Amy had not returned by morning, with Detective Michael Gonzalez informing Amy's mother.
We interviewed all of her family, all of her friends, all of her acquaintances. We did a lot of canvassing of the neighborhood where she was last seen. We did everything we could to try to find her. You know, we checked with hospitals and morgues and police departments all over the state and all over the country.
Don't panic. Call back if Amy isn't home by morning. By 6 a.m., a frantic Susan Billig had again reported her daughter missing to the Miami Police Department. On this occasion, an investigation was launched. Law enforcement began actively investigating Amy's disappearance immediately upon receipt of Susan's March 6th phone call, with both parents, frequently assisted by family and close acquaintances, actively participating in the investigation. Routine questioning of Amy's friends and searches of locations she was known to have frequented in the immediate hours and days following her disappearance yielded no results. And as Amy had few personal possessions on her at the time of her disappearance, investigators rapidly concluded her disappearance was involuntary. Upon learning that Amy frequently hitchhiked around her neighborhood, investigators also theorized she had most likely willingly entered her abductor's vehicle. The sole item of physical evidence pertaining to Amy's disappearance subsequently discovered was her Instamatic camera, which was discovered by a hitchhiking college student in an area of grass beside the Wildwood exit on Florida's Turnpike, approximately 250 miles northwest of Miami, on March 18th. Processing of the camera film yielded nothing fruitful to the investigation, as the majority of the photographs were overexposed. However, one of the photographs depicted a light-colored pickup truck parked in front of the wall of a vine-covered building. Another image depicted a white van. Investigators were unable to locate either vehicle or identify the building. In addition to conducting their own private search for Amy, Susan and Nathaniel Billig hired a private investigator. This individual was unable to develop any conclusive leads. The family also printed and distributed hundreds of missing persons posters throughout Miami-Dade County. Flyers in both English and Spanish were also distributed both door-to-door and in public locations throughout South Florida in the hope of generating leads regarding Amy's disappearance. The family maintained a vigil whereby a family member, typically Susan, remained close to the telephone should Amy or her kidnappers initiate contact. Mother also contacted the Miami Police Department almost daily to inquire as to updates and progress in the investigation, in addition to holding several news conferences in the hope of maintaining public interest in her daughter's disappearance. On March 10th, 5 days after Amy's disappearance, the first newspaper headline regarding Amy's disappearance appeared in local periodicals. This headline revealed that both police and Amy's family suspected she had been kidnapped, possibly by members of a motorcycle gang. The same evening, a benefit concert to raise funds to search for Amy raised $850, and a fund was established at a local bank to assist in search expenses. A $1,000 reward was also offered for information as to Amy's whereabouts. This reward generated several public tips, though none of the purported sightings were confirmed. Both police and Susan Billig received several tips from individuals indicating that Amy had been abducted by members of either the Outlaws Motorcycle Club or the Pagans Motorcycle Club. These rival motorcycle gangs had both traveled through the Coconut Grove area of Florida en route to an annual bike festival in Daytona on the date of Amy's disappearance, and both gangs are known to have engaged in violence and abuse against females, including abduction, rape, and sex trafficking. The family and investigators alike viewed this theory as the most likely to explain Amy's involuntary disappearance. On March 16th, a telephone tip from a girl who identified herself as Susan Johnson claimed that Amy had been abducted by the Outlaws Motorcycle Club. Shortly thereafter, a family friend telephoned the Billig residence to inform Amy's parents he had heard from a lawyer who had previously performed legal work for the Outlaws of rumors of a teenage girl recently taken from Miami. At Susan's behest, and with the assistance of this lawyer, 2 members of the motorcycle gang visited the Billig household to hear her pleas for her daughter's return.
Hi, welcome to my house. I'm Susan.
Pleasure.
Won't you have a seat?
I was frightened because I had never seen people like this before in my life.
Look, I thought you guys...
And here they are, in my living room. I got a feeling of revulsion and hate and love at the same time. I wanted them to give me information about my child, and that was paramount.
One of these individuals assured Susan that if Amy was in the outlaw nation, we'll return her. Days later, these individuals phoned Susan, advising her to simply forget the whole thing. By June 1974, Susan had learned from a convenience store manager in Orlando that a young woman he positively identified as her daughter had entered his store accompanied by 2 bikers on several occasions to purchase vegetarian soups. At a time, a motorcycle gang had been in the city several weeks previous. As the fact Amy was a vegetarian had been unreleased to the media, Susan found credibility in this particular sighting, that her daughter was alive and being held against her will. Susan was more worried because the bikers used their old ladies like sex machine. There are tons of real-life interviews about the biker gangs, sheriff's department, and many more. Positively include the girl's interview who was abducted by Bucher gang when she was 13 and was traded many times. In the years following her daughter's disappearance, Susan Billig, occasionally accompanied by family members and/or investigators and family friends, extended her search for her daughter nationwide upon the theory Amy had been abducted by a motorcycle gang and was being held against her will and possibly having mentally blocked memories of her past as a coping mechanism regarding her predicament. Several individuals claimed to recognize her daughter, with those providing information, almost all with connections to motorcycle gangs, frequently indicating Amy was in a state far from where Susan physically was at the time of these new developments. In January 1976, Susan's search had extended to Oklahoma upon receipt of a tip from a gang member named David, who personally contacted her to claim to have recognized her daughter from a newspaper photograph as a girl he had previously owned. This individual agreed to meet with Susan at the family home, where he informed the Billigs their daughter had been extremely timid, submissive, and quiet like a mute while in his company. He also described a distinctive scar upon Amy's body which had never been disclosed to the media. This information led Susan to believe David's claims. David agreed to contact the individual he believed currently had Amy. Several weeks later, he contacted the Billigs to inform them Amy was in Tulsa. He claimed he would soon locate Amy for her mother. In expectation, Susan purchased new linen for her daughter's bedroom, which she had kept intact since Amy's disappearance, in anticipation of her return before meeting David by prearrangement in a Tulsa tavern where David claimed Amy would be returned to her mother. However, a fight ensued between David and other gang members in which he was injured. Another gang member ushered Susan into a taxi. David contacted Susan approximately 5 weeks later, alive, but with his kneecaps reportedly having been broken in a likely retaliation attack at the tavern for being an informant, to inform Susan her daughter was now in Seattle working as an erotic dancer in a bar, before adding this would be the last time she ever heard from him. Susan traveled to Seattle to pursue this lead, to no avail. Prior to his death, a high-ranking former member of the Pagans named Paul Branch confessed that members of his motorcycle gang were responsible for Amy's abduction and murder. This detailed confession was given by Branch to his wife shortly before his death in Charlottesville, Virginia, in December 1997. Reportedly, Branch had chosen to confide the specifics of Amy's abduction and murder to his wife when informed his own death was imminent. According to Branch's confession, given by his wife to investigators after his death, Amy had been abducted and taken to a party in the Everglades, where the Pagans operated a trailer clubhouse. According to Branch's posthumous confession, Amy had insulted some of the members of the gang, whereupon she was gang raped by approximately 24 gang members. To subdue her as she continually struggled against her assailants, she was repeatedly injected with drugs until she overdosed and died. Amy had died within hours of being taken to the trailer clubhouse, and her body had been hastily disposed of in a swamp. Branch himself had been repeatedly questioned by investigators in the months and years following Amy's disappearance, but had always denied any knowledge of her whereabouts. He had also personally spoken with her parents. His confession named one individual he alleged participated in Amy's abuse and murder. This individual, incarcerated for murder since May 1974, was interviewed but denied any involvement. Emphasizing his belief in Branch's posthumous confession, the lead detective assigned to Amy's case, Jack Calver, stated numerous details Branch had provided in his deathbed confession matched known facts of the case, some of which had never been publicly disclosed. Nonetheless, he added the caveat, "We will never find a body. The saddest part about Amy's disappearance is her mother's search, who spent her whole life looking for Amy. The Pagans went on destroying many more lives and was never even accounted for. For their revolting lifestyle and sick desires, a mother never could say the final goodbye to her daughter. An innocent 17-year-old was washed off of the face of Earth before she even started living. There are so many deaths around us every day, just like Amy, that remain unanswered. Let us know in the comments section below.